All right, we are live. Welcome to another Basement Radio Arcade podcast rant on this beautiful Saturday, cold Saturday for me. It was like 19 degrees here in the DMV. And this winter weather's been crazy here. It's been like 50 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 50 degrees. It's just been a very interesting winter. But want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat that's been waiting patiently. We have some folks in there saying, finally. Born Distracted says, finally. We have PCMR says, PCMR, baby. And let me give everyone a woo! The podcast wouldn't officially start without that. And I want to give a big shout out to everybody on Crossfire last night. If you didn't catch Crossfire, you definitely want to check out that show. What a great episode of Crossfire last night with Mooch, Dark Goldblum, or Dark Optimus as he's known as well, Gaming Forte, Eric Jackson, myself, and Xbot448. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, we had a great time. And but last but not least, I got a special guest again, a recurring guest joining me, Optimus Code. Sir, what is going on?
Now, at this point, can I be considered a special guest? I'm not sure what the rules are.
Well, how about a returning guest? Here on Brap, because now you've been on here a few times now, so we'll go with recurring guest.
Sure, that's awesome.
But I say special because you certainly bring a lot of insight into the conversation on any podcast you go to. Just given the nature of the work that you do and some time that you've spent in the gaming industry, I could tell you that I've learned a lot of things about the gaming industry, and you have certainly enlightened me in some of the assumptions that I had about how things work in the gaming industry, to come to find out that what I thought was true wasn't necessarily true. But that in part is because, I've never really had any experience actually working within that industry as you have. So we definitely, I know I see the replies in the comment sections on the podcast. I get people DMing me. They really love when you come on because, again, you give people a lot of insight that they just don't have access to, which is just great considering that, we do see some, and you see this, Optimus, you see this on the Twitters and in gaming forums. We kind of see ideas thrown out that aren't necessarily true to what the inner workings of the gaming industry are. So thank you again. We love having you on, man.
Man, I appreciate that. And so let me say, like, I understand what you're saying because in the beginning, back when we started, gaming really wasn't this billion-dollar industry, right? And it was like just a bunch of nerds that wanted to have fun with like digital entertainment, and it wasn't mainstream at all. And the typical story, right, was like the John Carmack of id, just a bunch of kids in their garage built this game and it made a lot of money. There was no publishers and all the stuff the way it is now. There was no multi-billion-dollar industry. And like you just thought the game was for gamers like us, and the people making the games were gamers, the people playing the games were gamers. And eventually I ran into the business of gaming, which just completely rocked my world because it was nothing like what I thought it should be. Because the business of gaming is very different than the art of gaming, and they think very differently than we do. And I ran into a lot of frustration in a lot of my earlier meetings with industry pundits, and as I got more and more into the gaming industry and into that space, and meeting more and more of the people that determined what went on behind the scenes, it's very frustrating to look at how they thought as a business versus how we thought as gamers. And they wanted to monetize everything. I'm gonna tell you a story, really quick, a real short story too. Um, like, because it's been going around on Twitter after that, that tweet I posted and you and I were commenting on back and forth, and people keep saying like how this thing is like common sense, right?
Yeah.
And I have replied a couple of times that common sense is not the same thing as business sense. And I'm gonna tell you this story, true story. Was with these game developers, and they had made this game, and this game set records, and it was the most sold in its category ever. And as an example, let's just say the game sold 5 million, which back in those days was a lot of copies for a game. and the development team was happy and they were all excited to make the next version of the game. And what they had decided as a development team was, man, if we can recreate that same success, like this would be phenomenal because we already broke records with this 5 million. And they looked at the battle system that they had and just the core mechanics of the game, and they wanted to improve those core mechanics to appeal to the fans that bought that game. And the business guy came in, I'll never forget it. And he looked at that 5 million that was sold, and everybody on the team was happy about the 5 million that was sold. And the very first thing he said was, how come that 5 million wasn't 10 million? And the people on the dev team were like, I don't know, like 5 million is amazing. Like, what do you mean? Because it's these type of gamers. We cater to this demographic, and to have pulled out 5 million of those is astonishing. And the next thing he did was he said he wanted that number to be 10 million. And so he started changing the game to make it easier for casuals and non-hardcore gamers to play, because he wanted the reach of the game to go beyond the 5 million. And we were arguing that like this is going to piss off our customer base and it's going to annoy those 5 million that trusted in us to make the sequel. He didn't care less because he wanted a wider range. And so what made common sense to us did not make business sense to him. And we were very frustrated, but him being the publisher, the dev team was powerless, more or less. And so the game ended up changing to be more mainstream simply because it made more business sense. And there are thousands of stories like that that I can tell you. But my point is, I understand what it's like to run into the business of gaming versus the art of gaming.
That is a great story, Optimus, because I think also highlights what we see in social media, right? Where people don't understand the business side of the industry, right? Where they're very more gamer centric, I think, in their views.
Yeah,
Where you
yeah,
have the people behind the scenes pulling the strings. And look, I always tell people, like, yes, developers are passionate, they love what they're doing, but these publishers are in the business to make money at the end of the day, right?
yes,
They want to keep the lights on. I mean, and that's
yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's and that's any company. It sort of makes me laugh when I hear people say, well, Xbox is more consumer friendly than so and so, or Sony treats its gamers better. They're more pro consumer, or whatever the case is, right? And I'm like, in reality, these companies don't care about you. They care about you spending money, but they
Yeah,
don't. I see Phil Spencer interact with a lot of people in the community. Mikey Barr did when he was at Microsoft, and that's great. But look, there's motivations behind that interaction too, right? Um,
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, so when I was a kid, Enrique,
yeah,
growing up in the 60s and the 70s, so again, I was really big into comic books, right? And comic books were fabulous. And one of the first things that I wanted as I got older was to see comic books that I loved as a kid represented on the screen as a movie, so that I could just like watch it all and with all the special effects. Because in the 80s, they had made all these cool special effects, and like movies was much better in the 80s than they were in the 60s and 70s, right? And so I wanted like Superman, and they actually did make Superman and all of this stuff, and it was fantastic. But I noticed that every time they made a movie from a comic book, they always changed shit around, and they always messed up things and altered stuff that shouldn't have been altered, and they weren't true to the source material. But the movies would be successful here and there, then they would go away. Then 5 years later, they would make a Batman movie, so on and so forth. Eventually, like now, the way we have it now, a lot of those kids that grew up when I did in the 60s and 70s, a lot of those kids are now heads of studios and they're heads of departments at major media companies. And the comic books that they loved as a kid, they now are in positions of power to make those movies and bring them to the screen. And so you see a lot more comic book movies now than I ever did as a kid, because we have grown up and we held those positions of power. But even though you have actual comic book aficionados in positions of power, they still have to balance that with the business. And so even though they love comics and they want to make this movie true to life, if there's a business reason to make a change in the movie or to have it alter from the source material a little bit, that business reason is going to dominate all. And so it's
Yeah.
exactly what you said. Even though we may have people in positions of power where Phil may actually be a gamer himself, which I don't know how true that is, but he may care more about what the gamer likes than his predecessor. He's still going to care more about that bottom line. And so the
Mm-hmm.
business of gaming will always win over the art of gaming. And that's why you have all those little independent studios, because they want to create free from the trappings of what the publishers will dictate.
And to that point, I mean, you look at and actually Phil. I mean, Phil, to his credit, does game. I don't know to the extent of how much he games. I know he does. I actually did have the
Mm-hmm.
pleasure one time. This goes back when the Division beta came out, Division One.
Oh,
Actually,
nice.
yeah, I had the opportunity to actually play the Division with him on Xbox Live. Um,
That's so cool,
yeah,
man.
it was cool, and he just like a normal guy. I was like, "Hey, Phil," I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And just
No, I had to
um,
go rogue on Phil, man. Were y'all in the dark zone?
no, we weren't in the dark zone.
Oh,
We were
okay.
just traversing through
All
a
right.
part of New York City. But yeah, I know he games. But to your point about that, about the business side is always going to win. I mean, we see that today with Marvel movies. The mishandling of
Oh,
franchises. I
absolutely.
mean, I could bring
Yeah.
up the Fantastic Four and you
Oh
know
my God.
when they introduced Galactus, and I'm like, this isn't Galactus. Galactus is not a cloud. Like that's like the worst. To me, that's like the worst interpretation of Galactus. I'm like, come on, like
Yeah.
that's not the Galactus I know. Is like 8 feet, actually taller than 8 feet, but like in the comic books, he's this
Yeah, he's the
imposing
world
figure.
beater.
Yeah,
He spans galaxies and
yeah, and he's got he's got his what I forget the group that kind of rolls with him. That's the name of the group that rolls with him.
the
Um,
Celestials.
is it the Celestials or the Titans? Or I always get it confused.
I
It
don't
might be the
remember.
Celestials. I think that sounds right. I think. I know Silver Surfer used to roll with him.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean that interpretation. I mean, they got the Silver Surfer right, but Galactus a cloud. I'm like, this is terrible. Like I can't support this. I just couldn't. I just can't. And I haven't been a big fan of the X-Men movies either. I think the way they've kind of. I'm not even a big fan of Hugh
You
Jackman
mean
as
the most
Wolverine.
recent one?
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Okay.
I'm just
Yeah,
not.
I think I agree.
I haven't been a fan of all the X-Men movie except for the last Wolverine movie on the take of Old Man Wolverine.
Okay. Yeah.
That's probably my favorite like X-Men related movie. But outside of that, I mean, I
Yeah, I think
haven't been a
after
fan.
X2, I kind of stopped watching them. Like if they
Yeah.
would be on HBO or something where I could watch them for free here and there, I might watch it till I go to sleep or something. Yeah, I lost interest too. I sort of haven't kept up because they just changed too much stuff.
Yeah, no, they did, and to your point about the creativity, though, the business line. I mean, like let's insert Bioware here, right? Bioware
Ooh,
is not the
perfect
Bioware
example.
that we knew when
Perfect
Baldur's.
example. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like remember you? I mean, I know you remember Baldur's Gate, Knights of the Old Republic,
Absolutely.
Mass Effect. I mean, that Bioware. I mean, and I forget who it was, former Bioware employee, and I forget his name. Oh shoot! What now? It's going to drive me nuts. But he has started a new. Um, he started a new. He started a new. Or he's part of a new
Studio.
developer, and I'm trying to remember his name. And oh my god, now it's killing me. Anyhow, but he mentioned that the team that he's a part of, it reminds him of the early days of Bioware before, before corporations got locked in. So, Optimus, hold on for a sec here. My daughter's here. I don't know if
Sure.
you hear her talking. Hold on just a sec.
Yeah, take your time.
Danny, I'm on a podcast. What's up?
I don't know.
Okay, go upstairs. Go ask mommy.
I don't know.
Okay, go ask mommy. Come on. Come on. Where's mommy?
He says yes.
Danny, watch it here. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Had to take care of something real quick. The challenges of podcasting when you have kids at times. They so, um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, Bioware is just a great example of that. The gentleman, I can't remember his name, mentioned that. Um, oh, Optus, I'm hearing myself in the background.
Okay, let me fix that.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, that's just a great. I think Bioware's just that great example. But I do want to get into kind of the topic, one of the topics of this Brap rant, and it has to do with reporting metrics, KPIs, things that the industry looks at. Hey, Optimus, I'm still hearing feedback. I'm still hearing myself.
Let me drop and come back. I'll be.
All right, man. Sounds good. All right, guys, we are going to wait for Optimus to come back.
I check 1 2. Is that better?
Yeah, it was weird. Like I was hearing myself talk in the background.
Okay.
Like it sounded like you were like watching a podcast live and had the volume up.
Well, I am, but the volume's all the way down, which is
Yeah.
weird. But okay.
Yeah, now it's better. Now I don't hear anything. So, basically, what? Optimus, I'm sorry. Can you hold on for just a sec again, man?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Hold on a sec here. Somebody's knocking on my door.
Problem.
It's kids again.
So yeah, born distracted. You had wanted me to talk while Brap was away. What you want me to talk about, man?
She's down here. I'm trying to podcast. Mommy's coming. So, honey, you gotta come get her right now. Come on.
That's funny. No, that's not true. I'm not wiser than Brap at all, man. Brap is cool. I like hanging out with old school gamers, those of us who've been around from the beginning and has watched how the industry has changed. I wonder where all these fanboys came from. Though. I'm like, who let these motherfuckers in? They just really all this. Like, this is not what gaming was supposed to be about.
No, we used to talk trash though a little bit, back in the days, but it was never like this, man. Like this is out of control.
Yeah, I mean, just some little healthy fun and trolling is one thing, but yeah, they go all in now. They be ready to fight. Meet me in Michigan or wherever it is.
Yeah,
like,
it's out of control, man. I think I have a theory on that. I do believe that there is, and this is a whole nother conversation, maybe another topic someday, but I do think there's some mental health issues in the community, and I just base that on the way.
I don't want to laugh at that, but that's
no.
funny.
I just think of the way people react and process things, the reaction to that, to things that they read, and how personally they take things. There's a lot of those things aren't coming from a good place, and I'll just leave it at that.
Facts.
So it's interesting. Yesterday, a Bloomberg report came out about Sony with the pricing of the PlayStation 5, and we're going to talk about that on Wednesday night on BRAP. We're going to actually have Bad Bit Gaming join us.
Awesome.
Yeah, Bad Bit's a great dude. He's been on the IOP a few times, and he's going to be a first-time guest on BRAP. So he's going to be on Wednesday to discuss that. But the one thing that really came out of that article, but it's interesting. People took that as, oh, this is new. Like, this is Sony, the first time this is Sony saying it, but this goes back 3 years. And then, Optimus, you brought up an interesting point prior to us going live about how this metric has always really kind of been something that the industry's looked at prior to even this console generation. But essentially what happened, I think this is kind of what got people in a tizzy, is that Sony's chief executive officer, Kenichiro Yoshida, said that basically the console business should be judged differently, judged by the number of active users, not the number of hardware units sold. Now, As we know, Optimus, the console warriors, right? The warriors, warriors come out and play, Yeah,
Yeah.
like those individuals, it's all about the hardware, like Puffy used to say back in the day, it's all about the Benjamins, It's for them, it's about the hardware sales, right? Who's got 100 million consoles sold? Who's got 50 million consoles sold? Who won NPD this month, right? To them.
Sure.
But as you said earlier in the podcast, there's a business side of the industry that's much different than the perspective of the console warriors. And we talked about this on Twitter yesterday, and the responses were very yes, without much success. So basically, and I'll give my kind of what I tweeted. I think I piggyback off what you initially said, but what I had said was basically, look, the only Microsoft and Sony don't care as much about console sales as console warriors do, right?
Absolutely, that's true.
And the response, yes, and the response that I got was, consoles matter, console sales matter. What are you talking about? And I never said they didn't matter. I just said that they matter more to console warriors than they do Microsoft and Sony. And basically, what the point I was driving home was that in terms of metrics or KPIs, the KPI that matters most to them is active users, and we'll get into why that is. And I think Optimus, you have a great insight into why that is, but it's active users because yes, and I never and Optimus, I know you never said this. Neither one of us said that the point of entry isn't important. Like that's not even up for debate, right? I get that they need to sell consoles. I understand that, right? But there's a reason why that the weight of the metric of active user outweighs for these companies consoles sold. Because imagine if I bought a PlayStation 4, but then I never used it.
Exactly.
That's dead weight. Doesn't mean anything to him. You mentioned on Brat before they hit economies of scale, they don't want you to buy 5 consoles for one household, right?
Yes, 100% true.
That they would rather sell those 5 consoles to 5 unique active users, right?
Yes.
And so, Optimus, why is that? Why would these companies? Why? I'm sorry, man. I'm laughing because people, you could tell the console warrior mindset was taking over. They had to fight for that narrative, right? We can't let that narrative go. And
they brought out all the weapons too. I mean, they was fighting hard.
Yeah, but go ahead, man.
All right, so again, the console war is fun, right? But it's a thing for us. It's a little like the game within the game. It's just a little side thing that we can use to say, hey, our console is better than yours. And it's been around forever, right? Like Super Nintendo, Genesis, Master System, NES, like it has never not been at least 2 groups saying that the thing that I chose is better than the thing that you chose. And it's like fun, right? It's not like life or death stuff. But in order for us to have these little console wars, we need a way to determine a winner. We need to be able to say who won. And in order for us to say who won, there has to be something that we can count. And it's like a pitcher in baseball. Like, well, what's his ERA? Or how many how many pitches does he throw after the 7th inning? And whatever little random stats that you can come up with. But the idea is you need something to count. I need to be able to count and say, we had more than you. And in that sense, it's really like fantasy sports. Because you got a wide receiver, he has his fantasy numbers, but then did his team actually win? So while the fans are looking at the fantasy numbers, the actual NFL teams are looking at the scoreboard. And did he throw the block correctly? And did he run his route in such a way where he drew the defender over so that he was a perfect decoy so that this other guy can score? And so we're looking at the fantasy stats, while the real coaches and the real NFL is looking at this overall performance. And what we have done is we have said the fantasy stats are more important to the NFL than the actual stats because we are fantasy players and this is how we determine a winner and a loser. So in the video game space, it's that same thing. You have what the companies actually care about, and then you have what the console warriors care about. The console warriors always care about numbers, and they don't care what the number is. Active users, as long as my group is winning it, then I'm going to count it. NPD sales or console sold. And of course, the granddaddy of them all is like console sold. That's like a touchdown, right?
Yeah.
And so there's all this hoorah about who sold the most consoles.
Yep.
And again, if you're going to leave it in the console space, in the console warrior space, that's fine. As console warriors, we can all talk about who sold what, who did what. The numbers are great and they're fun. They really are. I've seen a lot of good jokes come from the console war. And that shit is hilarious. It's really funny.
I mean, J Dub, who I was on a Crossfire with last night's like the king of that.
Yeah, man, J Dub is hilarious. And like he's deliberately trolling, right? And like J Dub is the master. Like I will grant him that. He crowned me the other day and he put the little headband on me. He's like I had been accepted. It was actually pretty funny. I saved that little GIF that he posted. So the thing is, though, it's all in fun. The problem happens when, like you called them earlier, these extremists, these console war extremists, they actually think that the bullshit that they are saying matters to the business of gaming, and they actually believe that their little oversimplified view of the business of gaming matches the real business of gaming. So they say all of this shit that has nothing at all to do with the way the business actually thinks. And so in the olden days, when you bought a Super Nintendo, there was nothing else you could do with that Super Nintendo but play games on it. If you bought a Genesis, there was nothing else you could do with that Sega Genesis but play games on it. Eventually, in the PS2 era, we introduced DVD players and Blu-ray players, and now 4K Blu-ray players. And when people buy consoles these days, it is no longer true that there is a one-to-one correlation between a console sold and potential game sales. Actually, it's much less than it was. For years after the PS2 was no longer receiving support, they were still selling them because they were one of the best DVD players. And what these companies needed was a new KPI to figure out what's the potential game sales of these newer systems. Because again, in the olden days, a console sold represented a potential game sold. That's not true anymore. There are many reasons that people buy consoles other than to buy games to support it. Like the example you gave earlier, and I actually know somebody like this. I know this guy. We had a chance to go look at a game, unreleased, and I got the invitation. I was like, okay, well, my guy here, he likes games too. Like, can I bring somebody with me? Like, yeah, he had to sign the NDA or whatever. So we get in there and we're looking at the game, and the game is fire, Enrique. This clown, before he admits if the game is nice or not, he wants to know what system is it being developed for, because he doesn't want to say it's fire if it's Xbox only.
Oh my
But
goodness.
if it's multi-plat or PlayStation, then he'll go ahead and say it's fire. So before he gave his opinion of the game, he needed to know what system the game was for. Once he found out that it was for PlayStation, then he was all excited, whatever. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is this guy is really into like the console war stuff. And when God of War sold those 3 million copies, he acted like, we did it. Like, wait, who is we? Like, you did nothing. What are you talking about? Anyway, the point is, he literally, to aid in the console war, He buys multiple PlayStations because he is doing what he really thinks he's a warrior fighting in this competition, and he buys consoles because in his mind he is helping Sony win the console war. And it's very similar, actually it's the exact same thing to what you said earlier in the cast, is that one person buying 5 consoles is much worse to Sony than 5 people buying those 5 consoles, because they would rather have 5 consoles equal 5 people. Because people buy the consoles for reasons other than gaming, they are looking for a way to figure out what is the ratio of gamers to consoles. And that's why Yoshida made the comment, because he wants the number of active gamers, not the number of consoles, because those numbers don't match. And the truth is, they could have sold less consoles and still had the same number of active gamers. They're trying to figure out who is supporting the system, not who just has a dead system laying around.
You know what's interesting? Most people, if I threw out the numbers for the attach, if I asked somebody to tell me based on the Nintendo Switch, the sales of the Nintendo Switch today versus the sales of the Nintendo Wii, people would guess that the Wii sold more games that had more active users, right? The attach rate for the Nintendo Switch right now is actually higher than the Wii.
I'm not surprised at all.
And so I think that, for me at least, is a good example of why they do this deep dive into these metrics, right?
Yes.
Because they want to measure who's actually active in the ecosystem, right?
Yes.
If
Yes.
you could buy, like you said, I could buy a PlayStation 4 and that thing could sit under my entertainment stand, collect dust, and I do nothing with it. That's a dead purchase in my mind. To Sony probably looks at that as a dead purchase because I'm not active in the ecosystem. I'm not subscribing to PlayStation Plus. I'm not buying games from their digital storefront. I mean, I think you said this on the last rant. They make more money on reoccurring revenue streams than they do console sales.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, and it's like you said earlier, the console is the entry point. That's true. No one is disputing that. But what he said, what Yoshida said, like those things aren't mutually exclusive. No one ever said you don't need the console. What he said was the active users are more important than the console. But I think you have people out here, especially these console warriors, they want to make them equally important, is I think the message that they're trying to say. And I guess they don't, I guess they're ignoring their leader. I mean, their leader is telling them clearly and in no uncertain terms, no, the active user is more important than the number of hardware sales.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think no one was saying that the point of entry or the console sale doesn't matter. Of course, it matters,
Exactly.
but it's not the defining metric or the most important KPI to these companies because they want to dive down
Yeah.
deeper outside of just, well, I sold a console, I sold 100 million consoles, therefore, I'm successful. There's more ways to measure there's other aspects of this that companies are
Exactly.
using to really measure success outside of console sales. Not that it's
Like
not an
like you mentioned the Wii. The Wii sold what 80 million consoles and it was an epic failure. It's
yeah,
not the number of consoles that you sell. The
yeah,
Wii almost bankrupted Nintendo.
yeah.
And
OBJ Don,
they were leading in console sales for a large portion of that generation.
yeah,
It's just way more to it than that.
yeah.
But again, as the console warriors, they oversimplify complex topics, and that's fine. The issue is when they actually think that they understand the business of gaming and that their little primitive views is actually how it works.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to OBJ Don says active users are coming from consoles. WTF are we arguing? Are we arguing about? We're not debating the importance of consoles. We understand the correlation between consoles and active users. What we're saying is that the console sales is not the most important metrics that these companies track to them. It's important, but there's a metric that's even more important to these companies than console sales. That's all we're saying. I mean,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the
that's it.
viewpoint of some people is no. It's console sold, right? That
Yes.
matters, and neither one of us ever said that. And Sony's not saying that, but they're saying that based on they get a better view of how healthy their business is by looking at active users.
100%.
And that's all we're saying. And big shout out to Lord Cognito, by the way, the live chat. He says, preach, brap, encode, educate, hashtag the Lord's work. Thank you, Cognito.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those guys are fire, man. I really enjoyed listening to those
Yes,
guys.
no, I really do. I love their show. By the way, check the Iron Lords out tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm looking forward to hanging out with them at this year's
Absolutely.
E3. I can't wait. But Pixel Beat G says exactly that's why these companies are focused on their long-term income. They want people in their ecosystem and actually spending money. And yeah, I mean, he's right. It's about money. It's about money. You know, it's always been about revenue streams. That's why I'm not surprised that Microsoft's looking to go to other avenues. I'm not surprised that Sony's bringing first party to PC. These companies want to make more revenue. That's at the end of the day, it's what it's about for them: revenue and
Mhm.
profitability. You know, but it's a fascinating topic, Optimus, and I think that it's interesting that, and actually this goes back to 2017. There was a article by Game Industry Biz that actually goes back to 2017, where Sony actually mentions that this is the most important metric for them. So it's not, it's nothing that's new. Like this isn't new.
Exactly.
I know that people read this in the Bloomberg article came out this week, but that's not new. I mean, this was actually mentioned by Sony 3 years ago. And to your point, Optimus, when the introduction of different media like the PlayStation 2, DVD players, when consoles became more than just game consoles, as you mentioned, the industry shifted in terms of their, what kind of metrics they're looking at. They needed to find a way to dive deeper into, what people were doing, where the money was being spent, right? Because
Yep.
like they're all collecting data on us, right?
Absolutely.
And so
100%.
would you then agree, Optimist, that they're taking that data and then trying to formulate potential business strategies or,
Of course they
formulate?
are. Yeah, absolutely, positively, without a doubt, that's exactly what they're doing, and they refine it as they go. There are tons of models that they use to try to come up with an accurate picture of their business and the potential of their business. That's how they set pricing. So, like a system sells for what the market is willing to pay for it, right? If we're all willing to pay $2,000, they'll sell it for $2,000. If we're willing to pay $5, then they have to look at what the market will bear. They're going to try to get the most that they can for their products without pricing it too high that they price themselves out of competition. So this notion of setting the price exactly right, okay, do I take a loss because I know I can make it back, or do I need to make a profit from the jump? All of that is based on the models that they're using to extrapolate what can or can't happen. And the reason that them setting the price is so important, obviously, because it's a PS5. So for a lot of us, we're going to buy the PS5 no matter if it was. There are those of us, and I'm sure you're included, who will buy the PS5 without the reveal, even if it's $800. We don't care. We're going to have a PS5. We've never not had a Sony console. We will continue to own them. There are other people that will buy it if it's priced right. And Sony's not after us. So it's this thing that's in business, and so it's called the 80/20, and it's not the thing where 80% make up or 20% make up. There's another thing. They do 80, 10, and 10. And so, as an example, let's just say you worked at Walmart, right? And let's just say that Walmart wanted to stop you from stealing. So they already understand that 10% of the people are going to steal from them no matter what they do. They can get scanners, they can get cameras, they can get metal detectors, they can get electronic tags. It doesn't matter. 10% of the people will find a way to steal from you no matter what you do, and you can't stop them. There's another 10% that no matter what you do, they will never steal from you. They'll find $50 on the floor, they'll turn it into the lost and found. They don't care. It's just not in them to steal. 10% are going to steal no matter what you do. 20% are never going to steal no matter what you do. The other 80%, they will steal from you or not, depending on opportunity, how easy it is, can they get away with it. So it really isn't for sure if they're going to steal. It's they have a potential to steal depending on how easy you make it. So they focus all of their effort on the 80%. We need to make sure that the 80% is discouraged from stealing from us, because 10% is going to steal no matter what we do, and the other 10 is never going to steal. There is a name for that. I forget the name of it, but they apply that across multiple businesses, across multiple verticals. And in the console space, Sony understands that no matter what we do, 10% of the people is going to buy our product no matter what. They also realize that no matter what we do, some 10% of the people are never going to buy our product. So I guess those are the Xbox or whatever. They're just never going to buy it no matter what. But the other 80% will buy it if it's priced appropriately, if it has an attractive offering and all of that stuff. So they spend all of their time, all of these models, trying to figure out what can we project so that we can accurately set the price of this console so that it enters the market in a position best poised for success. And the numbers and data that you said that they're calculating and using on us, that is exactly what they do. They run hundreds of thousands of simulations to try to figure out what will the market bear for this product that I'm introducing, and when will it bear it. And that's why it is imperative to know what Microsoft is going to do, because all of that influences what the 80% will do. People like us and OBJ, they don't care about us. They know they have us regardless. There is nothing that they can, well, there's something that they can do. Like if they just went completely crazy, like $15 million or something, obviously we're not going to buy that. But for the most part, they have us. They're not worried about us. They're worried about the 80%. And those models help them understand, what can I recoup if I have to sell it at a loss? How many users are active that are actually going to support the system for the next 2 or 3 years, where I can recoup if I have to take that initial hit? If I have to sell at a $50 loss per, and I sell 1 million copies of this PlayStation 5, but I'm losing $50 per hit, I'm in the whole $50 million just off the rip, just from getting in people's houses. I'm down 50 million. Are those people actually going to buy software to make that money back? If that number is too high where they're not, then they can't set that price at a loss. So it is vitally important for them to get it right, which is why they want to know the active users so that they can run all of these simulations and calculations, because they're trying to set the price for their next gen console.
So you're saying that Sony isn't scared of the behemoth, then? There's actually a logical reason behind all this.
What they scared, that terms like scared don't even enter these conversations. And I told y'all I have been in many strategic meetings with representatives of multi-billion-dollar corporations, and never has the term scared entered into the conversations. It's always about the metrics, the KPIs, what will the market bear.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a lot of data analytics that go into the decision making here that people never factor into. It's amazing how disconnected the community is from the actual business side of the gaming industry. And there's like, as you're talking about this, there's a huge disconnect, in my opinion, between what the community perceives and what's actually going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm sure that that's the case. Because again, I was in that exact same boat until I was brought behind the curtain myself and participated in these strategy sessions, they call them. It was like, good Lord, like, why are you? And again, what makes common sense to us does not necessarily make business sense. Those things are not related at all. Business is all about projections, research that's been done, and studying the analytics 100% of the time. I keep saying, y'all hate that term attach rate. That is the only thing they care about. Console warriors hate that term, but the companies, that is their key performance indicator, is the attach rate.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned we talk about metrics, KPIs. I'm in the world where those things are very important to companies that we support. But I just never thought about it from putting that into the gaming industry. But much like the multi-billion-dollar companies that the company I work for support, and these are like Fortune 500 companies. A lot of those analytics decisions are drivers, right? In the gaming industry too. It's still a business at the end of the day, right? It's a hobby to us, but it's a business to them.
Absolutely.
So, very, very, very enlightening, I think, Optimus Code. And, I think it speaks to what's kind of going on with the pricing, with what Sony's trying to figure out. Do we price this thing at $400? Do we price this thing at $500? Perhaps we wait to see what Microsoft does. If we take a hit, is there going to be enough revenue outside of hardware, revenue to kind of make up the loss in hardware sold.
How long before this is made up? Like, what are the projections? Yeah.
And they actually took a hit when they launched the PlayStation 4, but Sony's VP at the time actually came out and said with the revenue numbers from PlayStation from PlayStation Plus, they were able to absorb that hit.
I remember that industry pundits were saying, because Sony would not have released the official number, but everyone and all the analysis pretty much agreed on a $60 hit. And then right after that, the Sony VP, I forget who he was, but it was a high up official in Sony.
He was.
Said all they needed was one PSN subscription and they would be back at even board.
I believe they were losing $60 per unit sold on the PlayStation 4 at launch.
That's what they didn't never officially say what it was, but that's what all the analysts agreed on.
Yeah, interesting. And actually, speaking of analysts, Z Huge actually estimated the manufacturing cost of the Series X to be about $460 upwards to $520. Again, that's an estimate from Z Huge. It's not. He's just basing that on information he has. It's not official from Microsoft or anything. So I still think, and we'll talk about this on Wednesday more, but I still think PlayStation 5 launches at $400 and Series X launches at $500. I could be wrong, but that's my initial inclination to think that that's probably where these consoles are going to launch. Only because I feel like go ahead.
There's one thing like Hogue, I think, how do you pronounce his name? Hogue said on your show last week.
Yeah, Hogue.
Yep. The one thing so to be clear, a lot of times we say Microsoft and Sony, and we use those terms like interchangeably with their gaming divisions. But to be clear, the PlayStation division of Sony is different than Sony, and the Xbox division in Microsoft is different than Microsoft. The Xbox division at Microsoft is not as important to Microsoft as the PlayStation division of Sony is to Sony. However, like Hogue said last week or I guess it was this week, because today's Saturday, with Microsoft being as big as they are, the potential, and we don't know if it's true, it's just it has the potential to be true, is Microsoft, the greater corporation, could subsidize the cost of the Series X such that they would be willing to sell it at a loss, and the greater company at large could help absorb that loss, whereas Sony, they don't have those same options with PlayStation and Sony. And just because Microsoft has that option, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to do it, because that also, I've written software for Microsoft, and it is it was a very lengthy process to have interdepartment cooperation work together, and there was a lot of red tape and things that you had to go through. So even though it's possible that Microsoft, the greater company Microsoft, could subsidize the Xbox hardware loss, it's not guaranteed that they will. So it's just going to depend on how serious they are about being priced lower than Sony and how much they're willing to lose on each console.
Yeah, it's this whole thing's fascinating to me. It really is. The more that I learn about the inner workings of the gaming industry, the more fascinating this is to me, especially with the launch of the new consoles coming up. And so it's just really interesting to see or to hear how they kind of the thought process really into a lot of the decisions these companies make. Because again, I mean, we're gamers. To us, this is a hobby. To them, this is business. And that's what it's about at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
And that's why if you want to remove as much of the business interference as possible, then you have to go to the indies. But then the indies typically don't have the money to make AAA experiences. So you'll have a lot of games with like good gameplay technique and stuff, but they're not going to have the budget to make it AAA. So you kind of get, you get really good, true artistic experiences, but you're not going to get that AAA budget to go with it because that comes at a cost.
Exactly. And that's kind of what defines what a AAA game is. This has been, again, very insightful, Optimus. I mean, I think that I'm glad we had this conversation, man, because I think potentially some people in the live chat maybe have potentially had some takeaways from just getting a little more insight into kind of what goes on behind the scenes in the video game industry. So I'm getting called a Defender fanboy right now because of the DC Defenders, the XFL. They're playing the New York Guardians at 2 p.m. DC, baby, DC Defenders.
Oh, that's what's up, man. I think the XFL might have a shot to last more than a year or two.
I think so. I think because it doesn't seem as they're not running as many gimmicks as they did when the XFL the first time 19 years ago. Where they had the custom names on the back of the jerseys. They're not doing that anymore. I think when you score a touchdown, the conversion, how you convert you get an option for converting for a point, 2 points, or 3 points. There's no field goals in that regard for an extra point. That's cool. But I already joke around and say that the DC Defenders are already better than the NFL's own Washington Redskins. Because we are trash.
But y'all just got a whole new, fresh squad and coaches and tight ends, so y'all might be good. Y'all just let Norman go too. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, he's a bum. I keep telling OBJ, we got a team up north in Baltimore that wins. The teams are only 45 minutes from each other. So, yeah, I mean, seriously, the stadiums are probably more like 35 to 40 minutes down Interstate 95. The two stadiums, they both sit in Maryland. So,
oh, real quick before we go, Enrique, I'm sorry. Something in the comments just made me think of this. Also, so you got these clowns on Twitter reporting PSN active monthly user numbers as if that is the statistic that Yoshida was talking about when he said they want to count active users. And so to be clear, this has nothing to do with PSN subscribers, although it would include PSN subscribers. They care about that. And you don't need a console to be on PSN. I could get on, actually, I'm on my MacBook Pro right now. I could log into my PSN account, browse the PlayStation Store right now, all without a console. I can sign up for PSN without a console. I can be a monthly active PSN user without a console, and I'm still counted towards that number. I have the PSN message app on my iPhone, and when I log into PSN from my phone, that also counts as an active login for PSN stats. It is not true that you need a console to be on PSN. And it is also not true that the PSN monthly users is what Yoshida is referring to when he said active users. I was arguing with some fuckboy on Twitter because he inserted the term monthly users into the quote. Like, that quote has nothing about monthly users. But of course, he's on his console warrior bandwagon, and that's the only number he has that he can count with. And so he's using the PSN subscription totals, active monthly users, to represent the monthly users for the PlayStation brand. And that's just not how it works. And the good news for people like me and you is we are very fortunate that these dumb bastards aren't running the corporations, because they would be out of business and we wouldn't have any games or consoles to enjoy if you listen to these dumb bastards. It's like, what are you talking about? So I think it's probably some 14 or 15-year-old kid that's just trolling and has no idea about the business of gaming.
Oh my goodness, that is hilarious. But let me ask you something real quick before we pivot to the next topic that's more Microsoft focused. So Microsoft doesn't report active users anymore. They are reporting growth, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what does that mean for them? Because I guess my question is that a newer metrics, or is that kind of a metric that's always been something that companies have always looked at? I mean, I think they have. Obviously, they have in terms of growth, but I think like when they talk about Game Pass and Xbox Live now, if I'm not mistaken, they're talking about growth as opposed to active users.
Yeah. So to be clear, I don't know why they're doing that. I really don't know why they have shifted to focusing on growth. My guess, and again, this is just a guess, would be they are trying to change the public perception and that it is a marketing move to try to establish for potential investors how we are planning to grow and be stronger, and for them to focus on the future and what's happening at Xbox instead of the past and the slip ups that have happened before. I don't know that at all. That just seems reasonable to me based on their sudden shift in these things.
Interesting. Okay, that
What do
I
you
mean that
think?
makes sense to me. I mean, I think that's my guess would probably be that's potentially the case. But like you said, we don't know for sure. So
Yeah, I did find it strange. I didn't find it strange for them to be focusing on and talking about growth, but I did find it strange for them to not also release the other numbers in addition to that because they're not mutually exclusive, right? Just because
yes,
you have one doesn't mean you don't have the other. And so I
exactly.
think they could have done both, but they chose not to for whatever reason.
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting. All right, so I want to talk about XCloud before we wrap up this rant. I've been seeing this kind of floating around here a little bit with regards to XCloud kind of being a Trojan horse from Microsoft. And actually, I saw this I had a great discussion, and I won't mention the gentleman's name, but I had a great discussion with somebody on the live chat on Crossfire last night about this very same topic. And I've been seeing this a lot with XCloud being the Trojan horse because basically it's going to be Xbox on basically turns your mobile phone into mobile phone or any mobile phone for that matter instantly into an Xbox. So I think there's a couple things that go into that. I don't think that one. I think XCloud more than anything else is just in addition to those of us who own an Xbox console or in that Xbox ecosystem like me. I don't have physically had I gave my Xbox console to my kids. So anytime I'm actively engaged in the Xbox ecosystem, it's on PC. And I'm in the XCloud beta. I think XCloud works very well, by the way. I've been very impressed with the beta. I keep telling Lord Cognito, what is this wizardry? What is this sorcery that they are using to make this thing work the way it works? So, Optimus, I can hear myself in the background again, man. Um, so, I think to me, at least in the immediate term, in the short term, it's more of an extension of or an option in addition to being able to have access to your content on the fly if you want to. But I do get the sense that I think some people think that the mobile market, when we hear about Phil talking about, reaching out to 2 billion gamers, those gamers aren't like us. um, and,
Absolutely.
and I think that's a very important distinction to think about when you think about the business model. One, I mean, there's a couple things we don't know. We don't know how Microsoft is going to position XCloud. Like, is it going to be bundled with, Game Pass? Is it going to be bundled with Xbox Live Gold? Like how are they going to price this thing? My guess is it's probably going to be bundled. I would imagine I could see them doing that because I think there's potential value proposition by bundling everything under one price point. We see that with other subscription services, or maybe they do something as a standalone. But I think either way, I think to access this service, this feature, you're going to have to pay for it, right? They want people in that ecosystem. I don't see them giving away xCloud for free. So when I hear people say it's the Trojan horse for mobile, or xCloud is Microsoft's Trojan horse, I'm thinking, Optimus, that, well, how is it a Trojan horse when it's really an addition to console gamers who are already in that Xbox ecosystem? And potentially, xCloud, more than anything else, is really Microsoft's attempt to, kind of starve off the competition they may get from, let's say, Stadia, which to Stadia, when it gets running, if it ever does, Stadia will be accessible, and it is only on, I think, the Google Pixel right now, but will be available on other, devices, mobile devices in the future. So is it? And then I've heard the argument, well, it's really kind of an extension way for Microsoft to get their foot into the Asian market, and as you know, the mobile market is huge in Asia right now. But then again, my point is that you're actually, targeting a different demographic who has different buying habits than console gamers do. So I don't think that, and I think the perception is that, okay, well, Xbox is on, or xCloud is on mobile, therefore more people are going to be buying console games, or these people are going to be buying Xbox hardware. There might be some that might. I'm not going to say that there's a 0% chance of that happening. But I don't think it's going to be this mass migration, as that mobile space is just a completely different beast. We know that Apple's trying to dip their toes with Apple Arcade and offering a subscription service. But let's face it, people who game on mobile don't play the kind of games that we do on console. They also don't purchase games the way we do. If you look at something like Candy Crush, I don't think most console gamers would play Candy Crush. Some might, but that's not really kind of our bag.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I played Candy Crush because I seen all the hype about it, so I get in and like, what is this trash? So, did you ever play what was the name of that game? It was like Bubble. Anyway, it would be like a dial on a clock, but you could turn it 180 degrees, and you had to shoot your bubble, and you had to like line up enough so that they would all fall down. It's very similar to Candy Crush. Anyway, it would show you the next color that was about to come down so that you could plan how to place your current piece. And with Candy Crush, I noticed it's all luck based because you don't get to see what the next piece is that's going to come on the board. So you pretty much just is all random all the time. Like, how are they getting away with this trash? But yeah, the casuals love it, man.
It sounds like it feeds that gambling addiction.
That's exactly what it does. It was very clever.
Yeah, very clever.
So I definitely want to talk about what you just said, Enrique, because I don't think, I know for sure, there are a lot of people that haven't been listening to the messaging from Phil and Xbox. And so there is some portion of the community that when they say Xbox, they think about the console. And there's another portion of the community that when they think about Xbox, they think about the brand or the platform, separate from the console. And to use you as a perfect example, you gave away your Xbox, but you're in the Xbox ecosystem on your PC. And Microsoft is content with that because they are not focusing only on the console. And again, that's not to say that they're not focusing on the console. That is to say that they're not focusing only on the console. And this whole notion of 2 billion gamers, I think you're exactly right. There is a larger segment of mobile gamers than there are console gamers. And Phil said a couple of weeks ago, it brought all that backlash, fake outrage, or maybe it was real outrage, I don't know. But that Nintendo and Sony, he didn't want to be locked in the competition with them over hardware sales for the 100 million when there's 2 billion out here and Amazon and Google are going after them. And I certainly agree with that notion, but I think your take on it is exactly right. He is saying that I cannot ignore the other 2 billion and only focus on the console gamer, that we have to do both. And I do not think, and there is no way that the expectation is that those 2 billion mobile gamers will become console gamers by the time Microsoft is done working their magic on them, and there will be 2 billion Xboxes sold. I don't like that's not in anybody's model of the future at all, not even Microsoft. The idea is Microsoft wants to compete in the mobile space and they want to be bigger and dominate the mobile space. They're not trying to convert the mobile space into a console space. And people laugh at the mobile things, like the whole mobile market. But did you realize that Angry Birds, the video game Angry Birds, in its first year made more money than all of the Mario games combined since its lifetime?
Wow.
Mobile gaming is huge profits. And again, like I said earlier, it's a good thing we don't have these fucking clowns on Twitter running these corporations because we would be broke. The companies would be broke, out of business, and we wouldn't have no games to enjoy. Because again, they don't understand business. All they do is talk about what makes sense to them. The mobile market is massive. There is more money in mobile gaming than there is in console gaming if you know how to get it, like you mentioned earlier. It's there and the potential is there, but every game doesn't sell like that, right? Every game doesn't make that money. There are plenty of mobile games that's not making any money at all. So the idea is you have to get that, you have to enter the market at the right place and you have to have content that's compelling. My guess is they're going to bundle xCloud with Game Pass Ultimate, and I think it will just be another streaming option that you have. Because again, there's two types of streaming. Keep in mind, there's streaming to the mobile device, in which Stadia right now they have the actual streaming to a TV, various different mechanisms, and then streaming to a mobile device, which I think is supposed to also be part of their offering. And then you have like the Lockhart, or where people are saying Microsoft is working on like a streaming box, which actually connect to your TV, but then there's streaming, which is separate from that, which goes to your mobile phone. Those are different. They both use the technology of streaming, but they're different verticals from the business aspect. I fully believe that Microsoft's goal is to be a major player in the mobile space and that they do not have intentions of converting the mobile space into a console space. We use that term streaming too generically without clarifying what aspect of streaming we're talking about.
That's a great point. And by the way, Optimus, I do want to, we talk about the viability and how big mobile gaming is. For those who don't know, Activision Blizzard bought King Digital Entertainment, which is the creator of Candy Crush. The deal was worth $5.9 billion. $5.9 billion for a mobile game. Think about that.
Absolutely. Man, see, and that's the thing, us console gamers, because we're the original gamers, right? Since we've been doing it from the beginning, and like we do all the complicated 10 buttons on a controller and like all types of combos, and we can do all types of techniques, and gaming is basically our platform. It is astonishing to us, and it's really incredulous to see a mobile little trash game that's nowhere near the AAA content that we get. How could this dumbass game be more profitable and worth more money than these AAA bangers that we get? And the answer is obvious, because there are way more casuals than there are of us. And in a similar thing, one of the things that made me mad and a lot of the hip hop community mad was when Vanilla Ice walked away with all of the rap awards. They're like, how is this white boy coming into rap and taking over all our shit? Like, this ain't right, man.
Oh my
but
God!
Then somebody like
that.
Eminem, who is a beast, like he actually earned it, right? He's not gimmicky like Eminem. He's the real deal. And so you can see it in his case, but in Vanilla Ice, he's like, it's trash. We had that same feeling with the mobile versus console gamers. We look at ourselves as the real gamers and mobile gaming as this little toy thing that should be ignored. But again, the business of gaming, they don't care about none of that little stupid shit that we talking about what they should ignore and what they shouldn't. They are following the money. And the money is in that mobile gaming space. They're not trying to convert it, they want to dominate it.
I mean, that's look. What did we say earlier? These companies care about revenues and profits, right? And clearly, that's a big market. It's a big market in Asia and Japan right now.
Absolutely.
So
It's a
why
whole
not?
new vertical.
Yeah, why not get your foot? You have the platform. I mean, you have the brand. Xbox is a brand, right? You have that brand now. Use it. And I don't buy this. I've heard this argument. Oh well, that means if Microsoft goes mobile, they're going to water down their console content. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that they are dumb enough to alienate their core consumer in the console space. I don't see that happening. I still see them making AAA games. I still see them, and I could see them. Again, I guess the question for me though is, and I could see them making mobile games too. And I don't think that's going to impact the games they make for console. But the only question I have is, how do they sell this thing, though? If you're saying Optimus that they're going to bundle xCloud into Game Pass Ultimate, how do you sell that to the mobile space? Because it's a completely different demographic. They don't necessarily pay to play. And if they do pay, they're paying maybe $4, $5 for a game, 99 cents, or they're downloading a game for free, and there's microtransactions attached to that game. I actually know somebody who spent $10,000 on Clash of Clans.
Wow.
Yes, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up.
Man, so I don't know. I don't know how much time we got. Actually, I need to run here in a minute, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you a quick little story about microtransactions. We didn't call it them back then. So I'd made this Facebook app back in the day, back when Facebook was cool and Facebook was about the developers, and it was nowhere near as popular as it is now. And so they used to let you create these apps as a developer, and then it would show up on your wall or whatever. So I made this little game about like selling drugs and like gang wars and shit. And it worked basically on a 30-minute timer. Every 30 minutes, your money was made on your block. However many blocks you had, that's how many blocks would make money. And every 30 minutes, you had to go get your money off your block. If you didn't go get it, then your block could be robbed by whoever else. And so all throughout the day, people was robbing and stealing, and people was trying to log on to get their money off their blocks or whatever. And what I found out was that the college kids that had more free time, they were excelling at the game. And they were excelling at the game not because they were better, but because they had more time. And so a large contingent of my players reached out to me and they said, can we have a way to automate collecting money off our blocks because we're at a time disadvantage? And so I was like, okay, people want a way to automate collecting money off their block. And so I made this thing, but I sold it. There was an app on Facebook called Spare Change. And basically, it was like an integration with how you could spend virtual money instead of real money. Anyway, I set that little thing up so that you could buy it and you could buy it. He would work for a day. So if you wanted like 3 days worth of those things, you could buy 3 days worth. And it really was like the beginning of microtransactions, but we didn't call it that. I just knew the players wanted a way to automate certain tasks in the game, and so I sold it to them. And I ended up, I made so much money just off of that little dude alone. So I started making more elaborate versions of it, and I spawned out, and I ended up with 3 games on Facebook by the time I stopped developing my own Facebook apps. And I had made a very healthy sum of money off of what we now call microtransactions, but nobody complained about them. Everybody wanted them, and they were happy to pay for what we call the microtransactions.
You know,
In games like Candy Crush and like the thing you said, the Clash, like people will spend the money. I
yes.
think if you talk to that person and he has a choice of spending $15 a month or 10,000, I think the 15 a month will probably be more appealing to him.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the microtransaction. I mean, everyone complains about microtransactions. That EA, they're evil. They do microtransactions, but guess what? Their revenue supports their decision to continually put microtransactions in games because they're generating like billions of dollars in revenues. I think their quarterly revenue numbers for microtransactions like $2 billion. $2 billion.
Yeah, see, See, it's huge. It's massive. So my
Yeah.
point is, I think that there is a message there to get the mobile gamers to spend on a monthly basis. I don't know what it is. Obviously, I don't get paid to know what it is, but I do think that it exists. And like Microsoft, what they made Gears Pop or whatever it is, like they're trying to aim at the mobile gamer. I fully believe that Microsoft will spin up a mobile games division, which will all go in Game Pass day and date. And so they will all have access to their streaming service to get all of the games that you get in xCloud. I mean, I expect it to be very similar to Apple Arcade. Here's these 200 games that you get for
Yeah.
$5 a month
Yeah.
plus streaming or
Yep.
whatever it is. I don't know. But I think they'll have to figure out that price. But I think it's like Game Pass Mobile or some variant. And that's what they do with the ultimate mobile streaming. But I think that will be different than what they do with the console streaming.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Optimus, I want to say, I know we need to wrap up. I want to say thank you again for coming on this morning and hanging out with us for a few hours. Definitely always, man, always appreciate your insight into all things behind the scenes with the gaming industry. I want to say big thank you to everyone in the live chat. Thank you for stopping by this morning and hanging out with us. And I saw some new faces, some new names in the live chat. Thank you for checking out Brat Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. Make sure to hit that like button. We have 34 likes. Please hit that like button. We definitely would appreciate it. And if you're new, subscribe and hit that bell notification as well so that you are alerted when we go live. So we'll be back again live Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have Bad Bit Gaming on. We're going to talk about the pricing wars between Microsoft and Sony. I'm calling it pricing wars because, I got to make some clickbait titles, get people intrigued. That's what I do, man. I got to make it enticing, right?
Yeah, don't forget, man. I want to have that PC Master Race conversation with you because I want to defend consoles over that PC trash.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You know what? We're gonna make that. That's gonna be the next. Let's make that the next rant because PC Master Race. There's a reason why it's PCMR. I get it. Some people like muddy textures, lower performance on consoles. I get that.
We'll
I get
see.
that. Some of us like Ferraris. Some of you guys like Hyundais. I get it. But
All right, we'll see.
we're gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna line up my guys. You get your guys. We'll make it happen.
Deal. Let's do it.
All right, man. Awesome. Well, Optimus, thank you again, man. I really appreciate your time. And again, thank you so much, everyone in the live chat. Appreciate it. Remember, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and check that bell notification so that you are alerted when we go live. We'll see you next Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Gaming Forte gives eyes. I know Gaming Forte is going to be on my side with PCMR. But on that note, guys, we are out. Everyone enjoy your weekend. Peace.